We have become more Catholic than the Pope, rejecting our own art as demonic, while the people that brought the religion, the Christian religion to us, see them as high art. Britain proudly displays African excellence in its museums, yet Africa is still framed as underdeveloped. The Benin Bronzes are celebrated as World Cultural Heritage, just not where they came from. What makes this more painful is how we as Africans see ourselves. A while ago, someone made a comment on one of my videos. They said Nigeria needs to take away those Benin idols from our passport. And I brought my Nigerian passport. I had to look for the Benin idols in our passports. I checked all the pages of the Nigerian passport and I could not find any Benin artwork that this person may be referring to as an idol. Please, if you have seen any Benin artwork on the Nigerian passport, please let me know. Then I assumed they were talking about the Quinidia head because it's one of the most popular and iconic pieces of ancient Benin art. These same idols, the Benin art, are the same objects that are proudly displayed and heavily insured by the British. These so-called idols here means history and heritage, not worship for the British people. You see, that comment shows how disconnected we've become from our own history and our heritage. We have become more Catholic than the Pope, rejecting our own art as demonic, while the people that brought the religion, the Christian religion to us, see them as high art.
Of exceptional artistic significance and extraordinary technical feats of brass casting.
Most people watching now would think this is a museum story, a theft story, or a give it back argument. That's not what this video is about. This video is about who gets to define civilization and who only gets credit after being stripped of power. The Benin Bronzes came from the ancient city of Benin in present-day Edo State, Nigeria. They were not decorations, they were not random art pieces, they were not art for art's sake. They were records. They showed leadership, they showed trade, they showed craftsmanship, hierarchy, memory, royalty. These bronzes documented who ruled, how power worked, and how society was organized. In today's language, they weren't art objects, they were archives, visual records of a functioning structured civilization. And that's important because you don't need archives unless you have something important to record. A Black American streamer, Speed, went to Africa, and suddenly people realized that Africa is not just a continent of huts, rows of huts, sand, lions, animals. That Africa looked modern. There were roads, there were skyscrapers, and people lived in houses and wore clothes. And every time someone said, this isn't the Africa they showed us, what they were really admitting is that they never bothered to check out Africa. In this Y2K era, somebody will tell you that Africa is full of huts and sand, and you did not care to go to Google and go on images or videos and see how Africa really looks like. There are many content creators who create from Africa. Speed going to Africa isn't the first time somebody has shown Africa on the internet. Yet, we had these responses. And for the people saying, oh, this isn't the Africa they showed us, who are the they? Who showed you which Africa? At some point, not knowing these things stopped being an accident, especially for Africans, African descendants. Because dependency is exactly how narratives are stolen. Ignorance about Africa is no longer imposed. At this point, it is maintained. People are still surprised that Black people built advanced systems. Check out pre-colonial Nigeria. Check out pre-colonial Africa. Pre-colonial Africa wasn't as backwards as people like to imagine. The Kingdom of Benin in Nigeria had a highly sophisticated urban layout with infrastructure that often exceeded European standards of the time. Art and a functioning system of government that surprised the Europeans. And this is according to the Europeans themselves. So that reaction of, oh, there are skyscrapers in Africa, they have roads, they don't live in huts, is not random. It didn't come from nowhere. We have all been conditioned, black, white, every one of us have been conditioned to associate polish or excellence to non Africans. Small story. A friend of mine and I were watching a music video. I've listened to that artist on the message a lot of times, and I assumed that the guy was white. My friend also assumed the same thing. But when we watched the music video, we're like, oh, this guy is black because of his voice. We have been conditioned to associate polish, excellence, advance with non Africans. And finding out that that guy was black was very uncomfortable. And I'm sure you might have found yourself doing the same thing unconsciously. It's conditioning. That's why you see people come here and complain of accents. Your accent is heavy, I can't hear you. Even though they cannot speak my language without an accent, they expect me to not have an accent. How is that possible? And they think our accent is inferior. Many people associate accent with intelligence. Accent does not equal intelligence. You have an accent because you grew up somewhere. I have an accent because I grew up somewhere. It doesn't mean that you are more intelligent than I am or that I am more intelligent than you are. Can you speak my language without an accent? The problem is not that Africa had greatness. The problem is the world learned to see that greatness only after removing Africans from the picture. That's why you see African achievement is still treated as a surprise. Black excellence is still like, ooh, is it a fluke? Can they be that smart? Can they be that good? When history is stolen, identity becomes fragile. And I'm not talking about physical identity, like going to have a DNA test to know how many percent of you is Nigerian, how many percent of you is Kenyan. No, I'm not talking about that kind of physical identity. I'm talking about your innate identity, your identity as a person, as a black person. You can't build confidence on a history that lives in someone else's museum. The Benin Bronzes don't just tell a story of the past. They explain why conversations about Africa still feel contested today. And that's why this story matters. Africa was never empty, never silent, never waiting to be discovered. Africa of proud warriors in ancestral savannas,